Today we're going to learn about comparing fractions with unlike denominators. Let's dive in. First, let's make sure we know the correct symbols to use. This is greater than, this is less than, and this is equal to. We also need to make sure we're using the same vocabulary. In a fraction, the top number is called the numerator, and the bottom number is called the denominator. Number lines can be very useful tools when comparing fractions. Take a look at these two number lines. The top one has fourths, and the bottom one has halves. Let's compare 1/4 and 1/2. With the number lines, it's really easy to see that 1/4 is less than 1/2. Now we've shown with our number lines that 1/4 is less than 1/2. Let's learn another way to find the same answer. Remember that the denominator is the bottom number of a fraction, and you can see that 1/4 and 1/2 have unlike denominators. The denominators are different. To compare fractions, we have to find like denominators. Our first step is to find equivalent fractions that have the same denominator. To do that, we need to count the multiples of each denominator. 4, 8, 12. Those are the multiples for 4. 2, 4, 6. Those are some of the multiples for 2. You can see that 4 is on both lists. 4 is a common multiple of 2 and 4, and that makes it a perfect common denominator. Now that we know 4 is our common denominator, we need to turn 1/2 into an equivalent fraction with 4 as the denominator. How do we do that? Well, 2 times 2 is 4. Whatever we do to the denominator, we have to do to the numerator. 1 times 2 is 2. The equivalent fraction is 2/4. Now we can compare 1/4 and 2/4. Since the denominators are the same, we just have to compare the numerators. 1 is less than 2, so 1/4 is less than 2/4. And remember, 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2. Now we've shown 1/4 is less than 1/2. Let's review what we just did. To compare fractions with unlike denominators, first we listed the multiples of both denominators, and then we looked on both lists to find a number they had in common. Next, we multiplied the numerators to find equivalent fractions. And finally, we were able to compare the fractions once the denominators were the same. Let's try another example. Let's compare 2/4 and 2/3. Fourths and thirds are not common denominators, so our first step will be finding a common denominator. Do you remember how to do that? That's right. We need to start by listing the multiples. 4, 8, 12, 16. Now let's list the multiples of 3. 3, 6, 9, 12. Both have 12. That's our common denominator. Now that we know our common denominator is 12, let's find equivalent fractions. First, let's find a fraction equivalent to 2/4. What do we do to the 4 to make it a 12? We multiply by 3, so we need to do the same to the numerator. 2 times 3 is 6, so 6/12 is equivalent to 2/4. Now let's find a fraction that's equivalent to 2/3. We multiply 3 times 4 to get to 12, so we need to do the same for the numerator. 2 times 4 is 8. 2/3 is equivalent to 8/12. Now that we found our common denominators, we can easily compare the fractions. 8/12 is greater than 6/12. Since 2/3 is equivalent to 8/12 and 2/4 is equivalent to 6/12, we know that 2/3 is greater than 2/4. Let's double check our work with these number lines. The top number line shows fourths. The bottom number line shows thirds. You can see that the one whole is the same size, and that's why we can use them to compare. 2/3 is greater than 2/4. So remember, when you're comparing fractions with unlike denominators, first list the multiples of both of the denominators. That helps you find a denominator that they have in common. Then multiply the numerators. That makes sure you have equivalent fractions. And once you have your equivalent fractions with a common denominator, then you can easily compare them. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to Ms. Cotton's Corner for more learning fun.
And if you're a teacher, you can find Ms. Cotton's Corner on Teachers Pay Teachers, Instagram, YouTube, and my blog at mscottonscorner.com. See you there!